I've already spoken on. I'm not a fan of court packing, but I don't want to get off on that whole issue. I want to keep focused. The president will love nothing better than to fight about whether or not I would, in fact, pack the court or not pack the court, et cetera. The focus is, why is he doing what he's doing now?
You know, Shauna, as much as Republicans, Mitch McConnell have savaged Senate norms, political norms, have lied through their teeth over the past 4 years, denying Merrick Garland even a hearing, and then lying about a standard which they broke their own standard. There are some Democrats who could constitutionally move forward and add a couple of seats a couple of years from now to the Supreme Court. But some have pointed out that a guy who's been in the Senate for as long as Joe Biden has been in, an institutionalist, probably not. That probably would not be the first thing that would come to mind for Joe Biden.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to understand is if former Vice President Biden is elected president of the United States, he has a certain amount of political capital that he will be able to spend. And I think, you know, depending on how big of a landslide it might be for him, that it has more political capital versus less. This may not be what he wants to spend that political capital on. We have multiple things coming down the road. One, Supreme Court is supposed to hear that ACA case, so the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare case. If for some reason Obamacare is struck down, and we wouldn't know that for multiple months, and I understand that, that may be something that he has to spend political capital on because they are running so hard on things like health care. So I think Joe Biden has now answered the question of court packing, that he's not really going to answer it until after the election. Politically, there is no good reason to answer this question in a concrete way until after the election. And this may not be the thing that he needs to spend a lot of his energy on come next year. But I do think, you know, he is leaving in some ways it open that if there are Democratic senators who want to talk about that, if there are Democratic senators who want to put forth some kind of bills next year about the size of the Supreme Court, then he is not saying don't do that. He's just saying politically, this is not the thing I should be talking about right now.
Shauna Thomas, thank you very much. And still ahead, the president returned to the campaign trail last night as if he had never had the virus, flouting safety protocols and telling his supporters it's okay to ignore lockdown measures. Plus, what Dr. Anthony Fauci is saying about the president's decision to continue holding large rallies. Morning Joe is coming right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.